Hello, everybody, and welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. So, welcome to a new series looking at the tasting section for the WSET Level 3, and this is exclusively for my North American contingent, specifically the United States. And that is because I have selected 6 wines from one of the largest liquor store chains in the States, and I'm going to give you my full examiner's notes on these wines. So you can go out and purchase these wines and taste along in preparation for your examination. As always, if you have a comment or a question, please do get in touch. You can do so by leaving a comment below. And in that description below this video will be all the details of the 6 wines that are available from Total Wines and More. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you'll see here on your slide, this is a 3-part series. So we have tasting pair 1, 2, and 3 in those 3 parts. So a total of 6 wines, 2 wines per part. Now, all 6 wines are available at Total Wine for about $105. Now, the total offer price, or the total price rather, is about 120, but you should be able to get these on offer at about 105. So very affordable, easy for you to, of course, use at home. This is homework, right? Actually tasting and assessing wine. So let's look at the wines you see here. So once again, all the information for these 6 wines will be found in the section below. There's a visual representation of those 6 wines. And starting from left to right, you'll see we've got Buttercream Chardonnay and Chateau Fourcasse du Pré. Those 2 wines are the first pair. Then the Albino Armani and Vina Alard are the second pair. And then the Beaujolais from Laurent de Lornay and the Sauternes from Chateau Misel are the third pair. So these will be tasted across the 3 sessions. All wines were tasted in December of 2024 and are readily available across Total Wine, which actually operates in somewhat like 28 states in the US, and it has around 280, 290 stores. So you should be able to have very easy access to these fairly common wines found at the Total Wine. So we're going to begin looking at our first 2 wines. Now, if you are watching this video for the first time and you wish to participate, of course, you're going to need to go out and get these wines and then come back. And I would follow along this video and pause around now to taste your own wines. Taste the 2 wines, Buttercream Chardonnay and Chateau Fourcasse du Pré. Taste them in your own time. Put your full systematic approach to tasting notes down. And as I'm about to go through these wines, you can then, of course, assess to see how well you have done. It's very useful practice. I do wish to actually reiterate the fact that, of course, you will have your own personal tutor in whatever school that you are teaching, that you are learning in rather. So please make sure that you are calibrating to their palate. As of course I am not going to be your examiner. This is designed as a guide to help you with really some of the most important factors of the systematic approach. Let's start with that one on the far left-hand side, which is the Buttercream Chardonnay. Now, this is made by C Family Wines. The wine name is called Buttercream. That's our brand. It is full-on Chardonnay from California from the 2023 vintage. It hits in at 14.1% alcohol, and you should be able to get it just under $15. On offer, probably about $13.50. So let's have a look at this wine to begin with, and you'll see here that I do have the wine. The appearance and nose to begin with on your slide. So the way that I will show you my examiner's notes is by putting the systematic approach to tasting up on the screen, and I will go through by highlighting, as you'll see here, what I find as an examiner. So first of all, the top half of your screen is the appearance. And you'll see I have not highlighted anything to do with clarity or other observations. You may wish to put those down, but they are not actually assessed by the examiner. So we are just going here for intensity and colour. Now, this wine has a little bit of darkness to it. And in fact, if you tip this wine away from you, when you are assessing it visually, you'll see that it's not the most watery of rims. Now, most white wine is very watery on the rim, and that's why we say it's pale. But this is just a little bit thinner. So I've gone for medium and lemon for this wine style. Now, if you are a little bit concerned about the appearance and you wish to have some point of reference, you will have, in this case of 6 wines from Total Wine, a pale lemon style, and that will come from the Pinot Grigio. This one, which is medium lemon, and you will actually have a medium gold by way of the Sauternes. So you will have the 3 different styles to compare against one another. So this is medium lemon. And typically with that shift of intensity up to medium from pale, that often tells us that we've got something else going on, perhaps something like oak fermentation and or maturation, or something like lees or malolactic conversion. So the nose is what comes next. The appearance was 2 marks. The nose is a total of 7 marks. And the first 2 of those are identified there at the bottom of your screen. So we don't get a mark for saying condition. This wine is clean, but you can put it if you wish, but there's no mark. The intensity here of this wine is that it's actually very intense. It's actually pronounced, as I've listed on your sheet below there. And that's because this wine is made to be a no prisoners approach to wine making. So this is full on ripe, has some sweetness in there. It has a lot of floral, woody, leesy, creamy, you name it, it's really screaming out the glass. So you will actually start to smell this easily 10-15 centimeters away from the glass, and that's your nose. So this is pronounced, and it's actually a youthful expression because it is not showing any tertiary. Now this is what I'm going to discuss next in the next 2 slides. So I will come back to this slide just to triple check to see if we're okay with the development. So far, pronounced and youthful is what you would write for this wine. Now we go to the aromas, where there are 5 marks available. Okay. Now, the first thing I must mention here is that there is no negative marking on this part, both the aromas and the flavours of the nose and palate. Therefore, you can write more than the allotted marks. The allotted marks here are 5, but you can put more. I would always urge my students, and I always do, to put between 5 and 15 of the aromas and flavours. If it's a fairly delicate wine with less intensity, probably somewhere between 5 and 8. If it is a wine that has much greater intensity, often sort of 10 to 15. So you'll see here, I've got the primary aromas up on the slide, split into their clusters and then their descriptors. You can put the clusters as well as the descriptors, but you are only marked on the descriptors, which are clearly identified on your slide. So I found this wine being quite floral. The biggest volatility in a wine is floral and then fruit, hence why it starts with this on your chart. Acacia, honeysuckle, and orange blossom, sweet compounds coming through. I found a little bit of quince, but moreover, lots of stone and tropical fruit, so peach, apricot, nectarine, even mandarin. And if you do get something which is outside of the notes you see here, please do put it down, as long as it's fairly normal, of course. You could put down something like mandarin, for example, but you wouldn't put something down, I don't know, like my husband's sock drawer or something like that, which is very personal to you. So peach, apricot, nectarine, mandarin, banana, mango, pineapple, and they're actually quite ripe, overripe, in fact, in their style. Then that overripeness for me is almost like this kind of preserved stewed fruit coming through. The emphasis on the grape growing and winemaking here, certainly at 14.1% alcohol, is for ripeness. Hence why we're not finding really herbaceous characters, which you find fourth from the bottom as a cluster. There's nothing else I find really. This is fruit and floral in the overripe side of things. Then we've got secondary characteristics. Now, in your exam, of course, if you were to get this wine, you wouldn't know what the wine is. We have that power as we're tasting this wine. We know that they've gone through a lot of character here. This is matured in new American oak barrels, partially, and goes through full malolactic conversion and yeast autolysis. Hence why there is a lot of highlighting here in the secondary aroma part of the slide at the top there. So yeast like bread, toast, bread dough. Malolactic like butter, cream, and cheese. And then oak-based characters and the sweeter side of oak, so vanilla, butterscotch, coconut, toast, and nutmeg. So this wine is very much about ripeness and lots of secondary base characters. Now, I did not find any tertiary. One of the early ones to look out for is things like honey or nuttiness. Now, I don't think it's honey. I think it's more like honeysuckle, which is a floral compound. And I don't think it's nutty at this point. So I don't find any tertiary. So going back to the nose, the first slide there, you'll see at the bottom, youthful is when you do not find tertiary. So hence why this is highlighted. Developing would be if you find at least one tertiary, and fully developed would be lots of tertiary. So that's why this is youthful. So on the nose, pronounced youthful, and 5 of those aromas. Now you need to be hitting the 5 of what I found on those 2 slides. And as an examiner, I have put down here somewhere in the region, let's count these out. Primary, there's 3, 4, 7, 10. There's about 12 on primary. And then 1, 2, 3, 6, 11 on secondary. So I've actually, as an examiner here, got 23. You won't be doing that. You need to be somewhere between 5 and 15. And on this wine, I would hope you'll get something like 12 because they're quite obvious characteristics. Then we go on to the tasting. And I've highlighted everything already up on the screen, but I will break this down into the sections. So I'm going to go through sweetness, acid, and alcohol, body and flavor intensity, and then the characteristics and finish. So basically 3 sips is what you would expect. But of course, you could do it many more. You have that ample opportunity in the level 3 exam. Now, interestingly, I actually found that there's a little bit of sweetness here, residual sugar. Now, this could be the fact that you've got pineapple chunks, banana, mango, peach, all those characters making your brain think there is some sugar. But I think there's a little bit of texture, residual sugar there. I'm not sure on the actual number on this wine, but I would hazard a guess this is somewhere around off dry, making it quite commercial. Then the acidity here. They have, of course, controlled the acidity, but it's not sky high. This wine is being made in a way to be fairly accessible, so not to alienate people that don't like high levels of acid. So I would say medium to medium plus acidity. Okay, and you'll see there, I have put down a range. On 2 of the tasting notes, I, as an examiner, could put down a range. You can't. You must put down one thing. If you hit my range, medium or medium plus, then you will get the marks. So medium or medium plus acidity. It's not too mouth-watering. It's high in alcohol, and that's that 14.1% here. So that's what gives you that heat and spice character on the palate. Now, it's obviously full-bodied. The sugar, a little bit of it, the lack of acidity, the high alcohol, all of those point to full body. But then you've got things like cream, butter, cheesy, leesy, yeasty, woody, ripe fruit. So it's obviously classically full body. The flavour intensity, I've put down a range again here of medium plus 2 pronounced. So I think it's fairly strong. I think it's a little bit more restrained than the nose, but it's still pretty big. One thing that happens here is the finish. Now, the finish, you will speak to your teacher about how to actually find the finish out. Lots of different teachers have their different methodologies. For me, it's very important that the finish has ample amounts of fruit in it, life, freshness. Here, this wine for me finishes very much on wooded, leesy, mallow-based characteristics and less fruit. So I've only put the finish down here as medium minus. That may surprise some of you, but notice when you're tasting it, lots of sweet fruit to begin with, but then very much fades away. I'm marking the fruit in that finish, which is medium minus. Okay, so lacking in that characteristic. Now, the bit that we haven't done is flavour characteristics. So far, you'll see that 6 are highlighted because on a white wine, the palate has 9 marks. So far, we've done 6. That leaves 3 for flavour characteristics. We did 5 aromas on the nose. We do 3 on the flavour characteristics. And they are, as an examiner, identical to the nose. I actually can't differentiate between those. I'm not allowed to as an examiner. So if I find something on the nose, it's automatically on the palate. And if I find something on the palate, it's automatically on the nose. So you'll see this is the same list. You need 3 of everything that we had previously for the nose. So you'll see there the floral cluster, stone fruit, tropical fruit, and dried and cooked, and then those secondary base characteristics. Now, I've gone quite quickly through that. Of course, you have the luxury of pausing and rewinding just to check those. You'll need 3 of those characteristics. And then we come to the finish, and this is where we find the conclusion. So the quality level here. Now, you can go through the process called BLIC, which is the balance, length, intensity, complexity. So the 4 areas. Now, this is a tricky wine, I find, because it has plenty of character, but I wouldn't call it complex. It's very direct with its ripeness and wooded characteristics. So I wouldn't call it complex. So I'm working backwards here with Blick. The next thing would be I for intensity. Yes, it has plenty of that. We were talking about being pronounced, for example. Length is, for me, medium minus. So that is a no. And then balance. Most wines today are balanced. What I fear about this wine is that it has quite a bit of alcohol, quite a lot of reliance on the secondary base characteristics. So it's not the finest of wines. It's not the most balanced of wines. So here I will accept a range from acceptable to good because it's very borderline, this wine. I think some of you will find that it's fine. You know, the balance is okay, but some may find it a little bit out of kilter, out of balance. So that's why I'm accepting acceptable or good. Would I age this? Now, technically, it has a lot of ripeness. It has a lot of lees, wood, creaminess, and some acidity. It could develop some more characteristics that will firmly push it into the good category. So it may actually get a little bit like nuttiness or spices on the tertiary. There is a potential that this wine could show promise for better quality with some age. I'm not completely convinced, but looking at the logic, which is fruit ripeness, concentration, and then things like lees, and acidity is there to support, it has some potential. Would I personally? Probably not so much, but of course that shows in the quality level assessment I've already given it. So that wine would be out of 20, 2 marks there for conclusions. We now move on to the second wine, which is the Forecast du Pré, which is the Bordeaux. So you'll see I've got all the information up here on the slide for you on the wine. So this is from Chateau Forecast du Pré. It is the Grand Vin of the Chateau, meaning their main wine, their number one wine. And the great mix there, that should read 55% Merlot, 45% Cabernet. There's less than 1% Petit Verdot thrown in there as well. So this is very much a Cabernet Merlot blend. It's from Listrac Medoc in Bordeaux, not an appellation needed to know for the level 3, but it's not far from Margaux on the highest point of the Haut-Medoc, along with Moulin-Medoc, which is next door to it. It's not too high though still, but it has some altitude. Now, this is vintage 2018, 13.5% ABV, about $25 from Total Wine, down to just under 20 on their offer. They still have plenty of the 2018 available. You can also find the 2020. Just please make a note, it is the 2018 that we are tasting. So the same thing, we'll go through the appearance and nose. This will be a little bit quicker than before. Now, the intensity on a red wine is about how much you can see through it. And really, if you can easily read words, it's pale. If you can make out words, but find it tough to actually read them, it's medium. And if it's very difficult to make out anything beyond the wine, then it will be called deep. You can also do the straight looking down approach towards the stem of the glass. I found this at medium, which is actually quite typical for most Bordeaux reds. If you are certainly a person that has a penchant for top-end Bordeaux, they're going to be much more darker generally, but most Bordeaux sits in the kind of medium category. With 6 years age behind this wine is showing a change in colour. Reds go from red, ruby red, towards brown. We are on the early stages of that development, hence why we call this garnet. So this is medium garnet. And this is a very important moment when you must, if you've got garnet, you must start to almost make a mental list in your mind about what's to come, because the nose is likely to be developing when the wine is garnet, and you're likely to pick up tertiary-based aromas and flavors on the nose and palate, respectively. So that alarm is going off, that mental note is going off in your brain at this point. Medium and garnet. The nose is next. So this has good character. It's not hugely exuberant, but it has good intensity. Well, I think the thing that I put this down as medium plus is because it lacks real concentration. It's very aromatic, but it's not too concentrated. I think if it had greater concentration, it would be pushed up into pronounced. So I've gone for medium plus. It's definitely developing, as there are tertiary compounds here. I'll get to those very shortly. So far on the nose, we've done 2 out of a total of 7. Let's do the other 5. Primary comes first, right? And I am trying the Forecast du Pré just here. For me, the first thing that really came through was red fruit. This is about half Merlot. So that's where you get this raspberry. I didn't find it sweet enough to be a strawberry, but more raspberry, red cherry, and red plum. That's Merlot. Then you get that little movement into bramble, kind of blackberry and blackcurrant characteristics. That's Cabernet playing a supporting role. And that's for sure in this wine. So a mixture of red and black fruit. Now, in the States, many of you, my friends, will be very much used to things like Napa or like Californian Cabernets, which tend to be much more cassis, cocoa, rich and dark. This wine isn't that. It's much fresher. It's greener in places as well. And that's what I'm going to get onto very shortly. But notice that this wine has good aromatic, but not just as dense. So I would say that these wines are, the fruit here is pretty much fresh, maybe in some places underripe. And that is the 2018 vintage for you. Then the wine has plenty of green herbaceous characteristics, which you don't tend to find in, say, Californian Cabernet. You might in certain places like Sonoma, for example, but not in a Napa or an Alexander Valley, for example. Here you've got plenty. Green pepper or capsicum, tomato leaf, blackcurrant leaf. There's other herbal notes, mint, even dried herbs, something like oregano, Italian seasoning comes through. And that is the fact that this is a cooler vintage of Bordeaux. Also, what comes through here is some sort of graphite-y, pencil shaving, mineral stoniness. Now, on the bottom of your slide there, I've put flint and wet stones to identify that. So we know that there are 5 marks available. We're going through that. We've done the primary, but we've got much more to go through now because we've got secondary here. This is French oak matured, and that's where the toast, cedar, resinous character comes through. That little bit of sort of green oaky note. Smoke, clove, and a hint of vanilla come through here as well. So these are all the oak-based characters. Then on the nose, you also get tertiary, the aged characters. There's a little bit of deliberate oxidation. That's the Merlot giving you a little bit of marzipan or almond. But much more prevalent here is leather, forest floor, tobacco, wet leaves, a little bit vegetal. It's not in a truffle or mushroom phase. This is very much in those early stages of development. Now, as a student, you need to be putting here between 5 and 15 aromas across all these 3 categories. And in fact, an examiner like myself will mark it as follows. Minimum 1 mark for primary. So you must get at least 1 primary. You must get at least 1 secondary and at least 1 tertiary. That's 3 marks. And then the additional 2 marks to make it up to 5 are across any of those 3 categories. So for example, if you were doing this wine in the exam, but you missed off tertiary, you will hit the primary, hopefully, the secondary, but you won't get that 3rd mark for tertiary. And then maybe you might get the other 2 marks elsewhere, but the maximum you can get is 4 out of 5 if you've missed off tertiary. And the same goes for secondary, for example, as well. We want the student to be identifying clearly that this isn't a wine going through age. So you must be hitting primary, secondary, and tertiary. If you feel that I've gone through this a little bit quickly, please, of course, you have the luxury of pausing this and assessing it and going back and rewinding and so on. Then we taste. So sweetness, acid, and tannin, and alcohol on that first sip. So please have a go. Now, it's a red. 99% of reds in the world are dry. So please put down dry. This has a lot of acid. From a cooler vintage in Bordeaux, this is displaying high acidity. The tannins are there. They're a little bit sort of almost drying, but not ripe. They're a little bit grainy on the palate. And that is what I'm putting down as medium plus. I believe, and that's what I've got now, is more saliva is in your mouth. That's the acidity. So high acid, medium plus tannin. There's a gentle warming in the palate. That's why I've put this down as medium alcohol at 13.5%. You don't have the luxury of knowing the alcohol in the exam. That's where that gentle warmness will dictate medium. So far, dry, high acidity, medium plus tannin, and medium alcohol. The body, now most people expect Cabernet-based wines, certainly in the States, to be much fuller, and they typically are. But in Bordeaux, we certainly have a bit more freshness in these wines due to its maritime climate, cooler location on the Atlantic, and in fact here, some slightly higher altitude sites. The body I put down is a range, medium or medium plus. So this would dictate to you that it's got some structure that comes from the alcohol at medium, the tannin at medium plus, and then the fruit is fresh, not ripe and sweet. That's why I've given this range, medium or medium plus. Flavor intensity is great, medium plus again there. Lots of easily identifiable characteristics. And the finish here is medium plus or long. Now, that is because it's in this stage of getting very close to being long. I think for me personally, it's more like medium plus, but I think a lot of you will put down long on this wine. Now, you'll see that I've highlighted 7 things. There are 10 marks available on a red wine palette. So we need to get those remainder 3, and that is the flavor characteristics towards the bottom of your slide. There will be 1 mark for a primary, 1 mark for a secondary, and 1 mark for a tertiary. They're clearly identified here, the same list as the nose. So 1 of those primaries, 1 of those secondaries, and 1 of those tertiaries. If you've only put primary and secondary here, no tertiary, the maximum you'll get is 2 out of 3. If you've only put primary, no secondary, no tertiary, you'll only get a maximum of 1 out of 3. Please pause this and look at this in your own time to, of course, assess. The quality level here is very good. Why? Well, BLIC, balance, yes. Length, close. Intensity, yes. Complexity, yes. I think at this stage, this wine is very good, has the possibility of being even more towards outstanding. So that's why I put this as can drink now, but has potential for aging. Many of you will ask, well, you put medium plus too long for the length. In my heart, I think this is about medium plus, and it must be clearly long for me to give that mark. So this is close, but I'm going to go for very good on this wine. So that brings me to the conclusion for the first tasting. It's the longest video, this one, as we go through the wines together for the first time. The second and third parts will be a little bit quicker. If you do have comments or questions, please do get in touch. So you can do so by commenting on this video below, or you can get in touch with us directly at info@winewithjimmy.com. It's been an absolute pleasure, and please do join me for part 2 as we go through another tasting pair here at Wine with Jimmy. And please, if you do find yourself in the UK, come and see me for a glass, or bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao.